Let me introduce you. Our author for the day, Mr. Abhilash Khandekar. Mr. Abhilash Khandekar is a veteran and a multilingual. Khandekar is an. Sorry, sir. Mr. Abhilash Khandekar is a veteran. Khandekar, sorry. So, Mr. Abhilash Khandekar is a veteran multilingual journalist of a standing close to 40 years in print and electronic media. He is an environmentalist and a sport administrator. As a journalist, he has worked in various capacities with the Free Press Journal and Hindustan Times, DNA, Dainik Bhaskar, and various TV channels. He has been the editor of Dainik Bhaskar Group of newspaper in MP and Maharashtra between 2006 and 2014. Our next discussion for the day is Mr. Chandrakant Naidu has been the regional editor of Indian Express and Hindustan Times and executive editor of Free Press Journal. In a spanning career of 50 years, Mr. Naidu has the rare distinction of heading Hindustan Times editions in UP, Bihar, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, and Madhya Pradesh. He has a strong understanding of diverse culture and titles and ethos, and a former executive committee member of Editorials Guide of India. Now I would like to introduce Mr. Uday Mahurkar. Mr. Uday Mahurkar is an author, political analyst. He has written 2 books on PM Narendra Modi governance titled Center Stage and Marching with the Billions. He is currently the Central Information Commissioner in the Central Information Commissioner in the post of a judge in the Central RTI Court. So the book which shall be discussed today is The Scindia's Legacy, a book on Scindia's claim, inexperience in a diplomacy and administration, and sympathy for the Britishers prompted Jayaji Rao Scindia to side with the Britishers during the turbulent time of 1857. So let's initiate them with a great round of applause. Sir, you can start.
So here we are. Abhilash Khandekar, a very valuable colleague of mine formerly with the Free Press Journal and with the Hindustan Times. And this is the second book I am seeing. The first one was about 7 years ago. I partly tried to touch it up also. This one is certainly a great evolution on that particular book, I must say, right candidly in front of Abhilash. This one shows that there is a lot of work gone into it, and also shows a remarkable discipline that a writer is needed to summon, and that's reflected in this book. His commitment, 2 books in a span of 4 months, both on Scindias, that have come from in 2021 and 22. Lots of material sometimes overlaps also, but both of them have reflected a remarkable sort of sense of research, also a remarkable sense of narration. So this is really interesting that both these writers actually happens to be from Bhopal, and it's very interesting to note that the kings can be a great subject. In my case, I have a little to do with this kingdom also. In 1906, a gentleman called Dr. Nagabhushan, he studied his medicine from Madras and then went to Nizam's service for healthcare, and he was posted in the parts which are now part of Vidarbha. Amravati, Akola, Balapur was where he was posted. And then in 1906, there was a famine in Gwalior, state. And the part that falls, Shujalpur was one of the areas where some villages were given out on Malguzari system. Mr. Dr. Nagbhushan Naidu, who happened to be my grandfather, came and settled here. He couldn't live long after that, but then the family finally settled in that part. And I was born almost 8 to 9 kilometers away from what is called Ranoji's Chhatri, the founder of Scindia kingdom or dynasty. His remains were cremated near Shujalpur. Now, for me, of course, I was born after this Gwalior state was merged in the union, so I can't really call it call them my kings, but they are my subjects, all right. So, in our case, because I happened to cover Madhya Pradesh for Indian Express for quite some time, I happened to quite closely leave the sort of mic for Mahurkar, Uday Mahurkar also. He has.
Abhilash ji had this book sent to me about 15 days ago. But I wear two hats. I'm in Ahmedabad also, in Delhi also. I forgot the book in Ahmedabad that I have tried to go through it very minutely in the last 3-4 days. It's a very gripping book. There is no aspect of the Scindia family which is left untouched, including their inner battles for property. And the best part is that it traces the history of the Scindia family from the medieval period, which is from the time Ranoji, the founder of the house, became commander of Bajirao Peshwa I. And basically he is the liberator of Ujjain. So this is a very important book, I think, in one sense. And secondly, what is surprising is that very few books on Scindias have come. Of course, 2 in recent times. But then it took a very long time for the first book to come. You see, no dynasty has I would say, continued to dominate a large part of the national scene over a period of almost 270-80 years, almost 290 years. So a book should have come earlier actually, on this family. Plus, I could make a lot of sense of this book because my ancestors were under the Scindias. I am from Gwalior. And therefore, another thing which this book is readable about is that it doesn't draw from few sources. It is drawing from multiple sources. Like a writer could have gone through Rajmata's autobiography and done a book. But Abhilash ji has gone to several other sources, foreign writers, writers like Ram Guha, who have commented on the Scindia family, on their political inclinations, on their political successes. So all in all, it's a very readable book, and it has got history, it has got politics, it has got through Rajmata involvement of the Scindia family with the right-wing movement of this country, Ram Janmabhoomi movement. So it's a very heady cocktail, one should have it, I would say, I would like to ask Abhilash ji a question, to begin with. Abhilash ji, what was that which really hit you? Because you're also from Gwalior partially, if I'm not wrong.
Well, I must say I'm from the Holkar side because I lived in Indore, and when the Bajirao Peshwa gave the northern or this part of the country,
say from Madhya Pradesh, So what was something which you really enjoyed while writing this book?
See, two important things that I never thought of writing this book on my own, but for that, like I have written in that introduction, but for that investigative editor at the Rupa, that you have also written a book for Rupa, and they have. So suddenly there was a call, and I was sitting in Ajay Kataria's office, who is my dear friend, architect, and I went out and I said, who are you and what kind? So when they assigned me this thing, I was actually flabbergasted. I didn't know how to react, and I took some time to know, because it was that I had met Rajmataji, I had met Madhav Scindia, I knew Jyotiraditya, but I had not seen or read the Gwalior history the way it should have been, because I was never a history student. But coming to your point or your question, when I started reading and researching, I found that the Scindia dynasty for last 300 years, there has been a consistent, there has been a consistency in their, legacy. And what Ranoji Scindia did, not much of that is actually known. Some people are saying that there is some credible writing on Ranoji Scindia's. When he first came to Ujjain, because the earlier capital of Scindia dynasty was Ujjain, and it was changed to Gwalior much later. But after that it was changed, and those who, because we are sitting in the Bharat Bhavan, Daulat Rao Scindia was the person who established the Gwalior Gharana. Yesterday Raghav Chandra ji was asking how the Gharanas are set up. So Daulat Rao Scindia began the music Gharana also. But there are many other issues about the Scindia family which were not known. So I thought they should be brought out. And one thing was very important, that the earlier chieftains of the Scindia dynasty, most of them died under the age of 50. There were not many, and even Veer Sangvi had also written that Madhav Scindia was also thinking what will happen, and eventually he died at the age of 56. So he was the first person in the Scindia dynasty to have crossed 50. Before that, his father Jivaji Rao was also in a critical stage. So there are so many stories about Scindia there, and it was very challenging for me to pack all the incidences or the historical facts of 300 years span in a smaller book like that. I think, as you rightly said, there should have been more should have been written about that.
I think you've done a wonderful job, because it is not easy to encapsulate such a long story in a small book. Scindia,
I would also like to say that the Scindias, like the, you come from Gujarat, like the Sayaji Rao of Baroda, Scindia successors, one after the other, were very forward-looking people, and the way they looked after their praja. The municipal corporation was started many years ago in the Gwalior dynasty, and the municipal laws, they also started their own train, and all these things have been covered in there was a train which was running from Mandsaur to Neemach, and Neemach, my friend Raghuraj Singh is here. So there was a private train started by the Scindias which went right up to Mandsaur and Neemach and laying the rail lines, and all these things show that the princely states were quite forward looking. And I can now wish I had read your book before mine book was, because you refer to Savarkar and his outlook about the princely state, and he was supportive of the princely states. In you have written many places.
You see, at the time when Congress was opposing princely states, it was Savarkar was the only person who said that in New India, in the formulation of New India, princely states have a major role, because they formed 1/3 of the landmass of this country, And Congress and others were opposing. Savarkar said that no, and eventually he proved correct, because except Hyderabad or maybe a couple of other states, all of them merged without much rancor. Suppose had they all joined hands and opposed unification of merger efforts, what would have happened? There could have been anarchy in this country. Yeah.
My advantage is that both are from the erstwhile Gwalior state, so, and I am not. So
Actually, in your case, you were asked by somebody to do this book. On your own, if you had thought about this book, how would you have approached it?
of course,
I mean, would you have, in the first place, thought of writing a book on India? or whole, even
No, the fact that this came in 2022, that shows that I did not think of this book earlier. And when I was asked by someone, then I thought of taking up the challenge, and which I did in about 12 to 14 months. But fact remains that while doing this book, it was very important to understand the social settings in those days, the British regime in those days, the relationship between the royal states and the British rulers, and the administrative setup in those days. All these things have found some mention in the book, because covering the first Maharaja, that is Ranoji Shinde. तो राणोजी शिंदे से लेके ज्योतिरादित्य सिंधिया तक करीब 300 वर्ष का जो कार्यकाल है, उस कार्यकाल में बहुत अलग अलग लोग रहे, जिसमें सबसे बड़ा यदि कोई व्यक्ति कोई मुझसे पूछे, सो द ऑल टाइम हीरो वाज महाजी शिंदिया, महाजी शिंदे जिनको बोलते हैं. तो महाजी सिंधिया वाज एन ऑल टाइम हीरो ऑफ द सिंधिया डायनेस्टी, एंड ए लॉट हैज बीन रिटन अबाउट हिम, बट आई हैव आल्सो टच्ड अपॉन दैट इन दिस बुक.
Interestingly, Mr. Kulkarni, who has written a foreword, he also says that there was an Ahadnama sort of signed on the part of the Marathas and Indians also, to protect Mughals from enemies of all kinds. Where do you take it from here? I mean, how do you react to this kind of information?
Can you come again? What exactly are you referring to, Dr.
Actually, there was
Dr. Kulkarni has written the foreword.
I think 1726, saying, and that is actually to protect the Mughal kingdom from all enemies. So basically they came as protectors of the Mughals also.
Definitely, and eventually as the history progressed, and we saw that Mahatji going all the way in the Panipat war and going to from Attak to Delhi, and finally the Scindias captured Delhi also. And while they had some good relationship with the Muslim rulers, they also turned against them. And when the triangular fight took place between the British and the Muslims and the Scindias and the other rulers of the country, so there were different anecdotes in that time in which Mahatji Scindia played a very important role, although he was injured and he had to come back, leaving the war in between, and that was the Panipat was a bad chapter, I mean a dark chapter in the Maratha history.
Actually, interestingly, Gwalior state, as it evolved, the language spoken in the courts was Urdu at times. And also, the Marathi was greatly influenced by Urdu. Marathi in Gwalior is certainly not the Pune's
not the Peshwa's Marathi.
Not the Peshwa's Marathi, not even would pass the muster when it comes to a Puneite talking about it. So, of course, that's a very small little part of it, but the overall influence on the rule was seen. But they got away from that and really became the very progressive kind of ruler that they were, which was unlike the other rulers in the past dominated by the Muslim rulers. But here, in this particular case, as I said, the progressive rulers, I have at least from among the newer ones, the contemporary ones, I have met only Madhavrao Scindia and Vasundhara Raje.
So about the progressive rulers that you have referred, I have also referred this thing. So I would like to read, with your permission, a paragraph or two from the book. So how much advanced and modern were the Scindias? It can be gauged from the following excerpts of the Gwalior State Darbar Policy, a document on education. Inasmuch as, quote, inasmuch as the prosperity of the state and the well-being of its people are dependent on the education and upbringing of the ruler, it is of extreme necessity that the child, the minor prince, as soon as he is able to move about, should be kept in such a wholesome and healthy atmosphere that he may from beginning tread the proper path. By wholesome atmosphere I mean that the manners and conduct of the people in attendance on the prince should be such as to benefit him. That is what is written in the Darbar Policy, and it further adds, whatever the age of the child, he should be sent out for an airing daily, and as long as he is not able to stand up and move about, he should be sent for an hour or two in open air in a perambulator, when he is strong enough to move about, he should be taken to a well-shaded place where he could play in open air. The place provided for the purpose should be covered with soft dust or sand to allow his playing barefooted. That was the Darbar policy's education chapter for the children. Another point of the policy states, children should be sent regularly to a regiment which has the reputation of having good discipline and efficient training, so that an idea of discipline and obedience to order should be instilled in their mind. It is not necessary that for the purposes of training any difference should be made between the male and female child. Both should be equally subjected to this course. For subjecting the children to this course, it is not meant that they should undergo a regular course of training at this tender age, but objective is that they should remain under an atmosphere of discipline.
Co-education, the equality through the co-education is something that is what is very important. The other part is, I mean, since you have covered the Scindia's in the later part also, particularly as a curious reader, I was into this 10th chapter first about the formation of the government in Madhya Pradesh. And also,
Perhaps I thought that, Udayji also referred, there were two books in quick succession on Scindias. Perhaps the publishers also thought when Jyotiraditya Scindia shifted from Congress to the BJP, there was a sudden new attraction towards the Scindia family and the Gwalior house, and the publishers wanted, and when one of the Scindias I wanted to talk to, he said, why there are so many books on Scindias? I said, I can't answer that, but I would like to interview you. So the fact remains that there was a newfound interest for the Scindias after this fall of government in Madhya Pradesh.
because the earlier one, the one book that came before both of you was V. Sangvi's I'm sorry. By Namita Bhandare and Veer Sangvi. That book, in fact, when they were researching, we were talking also about that. I was with the Hindustan Times at Delhi at that point. And we realized that that book would have been very, very far off in its content and its perspective when it comes to watching Scindias from closer quarters. And what I liked about these two books, one by Rashid Kidwi and yours, is that you have been allowed to be very open-minded about these books, your subjects. And that's something that draws me more to the books. For one reason, because the previous book that you had written on Shivraj Chauhan was very, very different from how you are dealt with this particular subject.
Because both subject matters are different, and I must say, which is the Shivraj book which I wrote after his 9 or 10 years in rule, I had picked up a book from our colleague Sunita Aaron's book on Akhilesh Yadav, who had completed only 1 year as the CM of Uttar Pradesh in his first term. Now he couldn't be elected. So I was inspired that here is a chief minister who has already completed after 2013 election. I thought he is much taller than Akhilesh Yadav, and if Akhilesh, there is a tome on Akhilesh Yadav after 1 year, and I spoke to Sunita and she said, so you have seen that book. So I was inspired to do that, and after that the book was written, I must not say, but since I hold him in great respect, M.N. बुश साहब ने मेरे को कहा कि तुमको और दूसरा कुछ विषय नहीं मिला था कि किताब लिखने के लिए.
ये भी हुआ. इसके अलावा मुझे खास बात जो अच्छी लगी वो ये थी कि उस किताब में आपने स्पष्ट रूप से कह दिया कि उनमें जो फर्क आया है वो उससे आप खुश नहीं है.
ये लिखा है मैंने उसमें.
I think you have more material to write another book on the Scindias.
Perhaps.
In future. There are many issues. I mean, a dynasty which is 300 years old, which has produced a galaxy of fighters, people with commitment to good governance. Ranoji Scindia revived Ujjain. The Mahakaleshwar temple was broken by Iltutmish about 300 years earlier, 400 years earlier, you know. And it was lying in a very bad shape. When Scindias took over Ujjain, it was in very bad shape. I mean, there are broken temples, ghats were not in shape. Even the melas were not held regularly, for which it is known since ancient times, you know. It was Ranoji Scindia and his Diwan Ramchandra Baba Shenvi Suktankar. What Ujjain of today owes a lot to these two people. They came there, they revived all the temples, spent huge money on redesigning the city, the ghats. In fact, this story, Abhilash ji had a much larger task. He had to cover the entire Scindia dynasty in a small book, a period of 300 years. But even that itself is a very fascinating story. And then the kind of fighters it has produced. Dattaji, Ranoji's second son, he died saving Delhi from Afghan invaders just 1 year before the Battle of Panipat. In Panipat, Tukoji Shinde died, his another son. Jankoji Shinde died, Ranoji's grandson. And Mahaji Scindia was barely saved by a water carrier. Another thing which signifies the by Rana Khan. Rana Khan, that family is still there in Gwalior. Another thing which, a tradition of bravery, a trait to dominate the politics of the country, and good governance. Ranoji Scindia was good governance. Mahaji Shinde, when he became the Vakil Muttalik of Emperor Shah Alam II, it was good governance.
Good governance.
It was good governance, Then Jayaji's Dolatro Scindia is also sometimes portrayed as a very rash kind of a ruler, But then, as you rightly say, that the Gwalior Gharana was started by him.
And he was a great patron of art and culture.
Then Jayaji Scindia, Jyotiraditya's great-grandfather's father, he developed modern Gwalior, for that matter.
Yes.
And there are many things which are not known about Scindia. For example, the pistol by which Mahatma Gandhi was killed by Godse belonged to Gwalior state. And for a time, and conspiracy was also hedged in Gwalior by certain people, So, at the time of merger, Jivaji Rao Scindia, Jyotiraditya Scindia's grandfather, was very fearful that I might be implicated in this case because the pistol belongs to Gwalior state. But Sardar Patel did not do so. And in a span of, Sardar Patel lived for only 2 years after that, they became so friendly that the oil painting of Sardar Patel in Parliament,
The Central Hall,
was commissioned by Jivaji Rao Scindia. Nobody knows this.
Quite right.
So there are many things, for example, I was with somebody recently in the BJP who is not exactly aligned with Vasudha Raje Scindia, But I was surprised to find a comment that her vision of good governance is very good. So good governance is one thing which
Running in the blood.
The Scindia dynasty.
Running in the blood.
It is running in the blood. Even why Sardar Patel was impressed by Scindia when they took control of the state. There was one Scindia state Ganga Jali fund. It was like Prime Minister Relief Fund, with which they used to help poor people who wanted medical aid, who were facing problems, So Sardar Patel was highly impressed, and he said one of the best states, financially managed states, was Gwalior. That is what your VP Menon, the right-hand man of Sardar Patel in the task of merger, he says in his book, Merger.
And VP Menon also says that the instrument of accession to be signed, and there were some royal houses were resistant about it, and Gwalior was the first state to have signed that instrument accession of instrument document.
And so this controversy which is being raised again and again, कि 1857 में Scindia's betrayed the nation. You see, there was no concept of nation as you see it today. And 98% of the rulers in 1857 mutiny, or whatever you call first war of independence, they sided with the British. And secondly, Jayaji Rao Scindia was only 14 years old at that time. It was his Diwan Dinkara Rajwade and my founder of my family, Jagdero Mahurkar, who was the commander-in-chief, they took the decision that
In 1980,
he should leave, since the troops have become mutinous, he should leave Gwalior and go to Agra. To save his own, for his own safety, you know. And in the meantime, this whole episode happened, and unfortunately, Rani Lakshmibai had to sacrifice her life. But he cannot be laid at
But
the
I must apologize to you because I have mentioned Dinkar Rao Kelkar's name, but I didn't know about Mahurkar's role in that. So I'm sorry for that.
Dinkar Rao was the main person.
Dinkar Rao,
Second
Rajwade,
was
Dinkar Rao Rajwade.
And you see,
So
when
you were
you
saying
when you raise a question that 1857 they sided with the British, then you go just 97 years before, and the greatest sacrifice on the battlefield of Panipat was by Scindia dynasty. Tukoji died. Maji was grievously injured, barely saved. Jankoji was killed. Tukoji is the nephew, and the maximum damage. The Afghans marked out Scindia for attack. The Scindia army and Scindia generals suffered the most in the battle of Panipat. So you can't, when you talk about 1857, you can't forget 1761. That is what I want to say.
So many people ask me about how did Jyotiraditya Scindia join Congress. Well, it is still shrouded in the mystery. But how did Rajmata join Congress? She was not in politics. So there is a very interesting. Nehruji had come to Gwalior sometime, and he had seen the influence of the Scindia dynasty in Gwalior, and this dialogue goes. Vijayaraje was sent a message that she should come to Delhi. Her husband was in Mumbai, and there were no telephone connections, and she was not able to talk to her husband for many years. He was a great horse riding expert, and on Mahalakshmi they had got a race course of their own, and he used to run horses and do the races. So Vijayaraje goes to Delhi, and she meets up with Prime Minister Nehru. Vijayaraje says, Panditji, my husband is not against Congress. Nehruji says, well, if he is not against us, then let him show that he is with us. Vijayaraje says, no, he doesn't want to take any interest in Congress. Nehruji says, then you take. Then Vijayaraje says, but Panditji, he simply hates politics. He will never be a candidate for any party, let alone Congress. That is precisely what I have come here to explain to you. Nehruji, well, in that case, you stand as our candidate. He told her glibly, go and see Shastriji, Hindu. Hindu will take you to them, and they will see about the party tickets. They are the people who are overseeing the ticket distribution. A completely shaken Maharani Scindia had nothing left to offer. She was demoralized and alone in the Congress office. She was then quickly asked to go with Indira Gandhi and meet Panditji and Shastriji. Apparently, Nehru was not keen on taking the brief conversation any further. His order was final, which Shastriji and Panditji had implemented and given her the ticket. Home Minister Govind Vallabh Pant also had a role in this as a junior colleague in cabinet of Lal Bahadur Shastri.
Said actually
You might like to throw some light on that.
No, in fact, I was particularly keen about these two things. Scindia, as you said, I mean, this is the part where he joined the Congress after emergency. Actually, in that case, I mean,
I was about talking about Rajmata, and Nehruji wanted Rajmata's husband to join Congress,
that's fine.
which he did not.
I got that. I'm talking about the other part that actually aroused my curiosity was about Madhavrao being the young man coming to the Congress and then not.
That is also another interesting Naidu Sahib history, that when Madhavrao came from being an independent to Janasangh, Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the person who signed his entry receipt, which I have given it in the book, and that was 1971. And Atalji was actually instrumental in bringing Madhavrao into Janasangh, and about 15 years later, perhaps in 14 years, in 1984, there was a contest between Madhavrao Scindia and Atal Bihari Vajpayee at Gwalior, in which Madhav Vajpayee was defeated, and it was the same Vajpayee who had brought Madhav into Janasangh. So this is how the politics takes place.
One of the most fascinating
And you may
parts.
have covered that election of 1984.
I covered that election. Actually, besides that, there was one interesting point about the Scindia part. I'm sorry, about the Scindia part. When he was forced to leave the Congress and form his own party, what he did was he announced his decision to quit the Congress through media, which was not actually subsequently followed up by a letter of resignation as such.
You are talking about that Hawala scandal. When Narasimha Rao was Prime Minister and he had to leave Congress and he formed this Madhya Pradesh Vikas
He wanted
Congress.
to meet the Prime Minister. He in fact sent a word to the Prime Minister's office. Incidentally, another Khandekar, Mr. Ram Khandekar,
Ram Khandekar was the
OSD
principal
of,
secretary to Narasimha Rao. He was from Nagpur.
He said that...
So there are Khandekars all over. Even if you want to avoid them, you can't.
So,
Yes, sir.
From Lucknow.
so in his case, Khandekar said that you will have to write the resignation letter first and then meet the Prime Minister.
Acha, this I didn't know.
He hadn't written the resignation. It was all in media only, never properly given to the President or to the Prime Minister. So that's how the controversy was. I was surprised that it would find mention in either of these two books, the Rashid Kidwai book or Scindia Legacy. I failed to find that. I thought that was an important point.
Indeed, indeed.
Certainly.
I
And the
think one of the most interesting parts of the book is the political journey of Rajmata Scindia. How she was a novice, how Jawaharlal Nehru almost forced her to join Congress, and how and the relations of the Scindia family with the right-wing groups, particularly Hindu Mahasabha, and how she reverted to her old ideologically inclined group, which is Bharatiya Janata Party in this case.
From Rajmata,
That is
another
very
important
interesting.
this thing, I would like to disclose it here. Because it now comes to my, there is a small reference to that. Mother of Scindia once asked me ki the BJP is constantly talking about women empowerment, this, that, everything, and why they are not making my mother was in Congress and she was in BJP, why they are not making my mother the president. So, of course, it was just a conversation. Later when I was doing this book and when I read Advaniji's autobiography, in that Advaniji mentions that Advaniji and Atalji went to Gwalior and requested Rajmata ji to be the president of Bharatiya Janata Party.
She refused.
So she asked them to wait, and she went to Datia to her guru and came back, and she said ki my guru has said no, and they stayed there for 2 days in Gwalior and they had to go back without looking for, because Advani ji was saying consistently that I don't want to become the president. This was post 1980, because in 1980 BJP was born and Atalji was the first president, and after Atalji's term was over, they were looking for a president. Advani ji was saying that I am not a good orator, so I would not like to take over as the BJP president. So they went to request Rajmata ji. That is the reference.
Very interesting, very interesting.
So thank you, sir, for a wonderful and nice discussion. Now I would like to invite on stage Mrs. Meera Ishwar Das to please come on forward and present a memento to our author and speaker as a... No questions. No questions. Achha, questions. Yes, it is. Question.
Congratulations, Abhilash, for writing this wonderful book. I mean, another book on Scindia. It's a good book. And I'm grateful that I got the book and I read it. But these sweeping statements which came from the dais, that the princely states, they had big contribution in modern India, or all the princely states we all know, and this is true even of today, that all the princely states, they have this running thing that they are always with the paramount power of the day. This is not a secret. Whoever is powerful, they will be with them only. So saying this, that princely states, they did great service to our country. When Indians, they were fighting with British, Indian states, Indian princely states, they sided with Britishers. Britishers were killing Indians. And what was happening to freedom fighters in these princely states, we all know. So this sweeping statement, I don't agree.
You can
At the same time, I say that
you
your
can have your
vocabulary is
point of
good.
view. You can have debate with me. I can debate with you. With the question, this was won by their ancestors. It was not gifted to them. Had they all joined hands, what would have happened? You are having a one-sided view, you know.
You are having a one-sided view.
No, not at all. Not at all. You are free to come and debate with me. I will debate with you. And I will admit what, if you produce evidence, I will admit it. I don't mind it. You know, no. ऐसा है कि पूर्वजों की जीती हुई भूमि थी, गिफ्ट में दी हुई नहीं थी. वो उन्होंने without any rancor they have given it to India. They have let go their rights for a new India. You have to see it that way, you know.
Any other questions?
Hello.
Please. Up.
I'm Dr. Pradeep Kapoor. I have a question for Abhilash. I studied at Scindia School, Gwalior, and was in Ranoji House. I have seen at close quarters the aura that late Madhavrao Scindia ji commanded and Jyotiraditya Scindia ji commanded. I would like to know your opinion regarding how, it was a big surprise when Jyotiraditya lost in 2019. So can you throw some light why this happened despite they being almost worshipped and people having such respect for them?
Definitely, it was a big surprise for everyone because nobody thought that he will lose. And in the last elections, when Modi ji had already almost was there in Delhi in 2014 elections, there were only 2 seats which in Madhya Pradesh Congress, one was Chhindwara and second was Guna, but in 2014 and 2019 also they thought so. But I think there was a tsunami also of in Modi's favor, Modi wave, in which many stalwarts in this thing. But still, I was also surprised to see because what you said is that people were worshipping. So when I asked somebody while writing this book what happened, तो एक कांग्रेसी कार्यकर्ता ने मेरे को कहा कि साहब वो राजा की कहानी सुनी होगी आपने कि हमारे घर में 4-5 वोट्स थे, तो रात को जब पूर्णिमा के चांद के समय उनको कहा महाराज ने कि 1 लोटा कुएं में दूध डाल के आइए, तो सारी प्रजा गई और सबने कहा कि मैं अकेला ही तो हूँ जो पानी लेके आया हूँ. और दूसरे दिन सुबह राजा को बताया कि उस कुएं में पानी था, 1 लोटा भी दूध नहीं था. So that Congress worker in Guna was telling me people thought that कि मैं ही एक अकेला हूँ जो मोदी जी को वोट दे रहा हूँ, बाकी तो सब सिंधिया जी को दे ही रहे हैं. And ultimately it happened that Scindia lost. This is the actual story told to me in Guna.
Actually, there is. If I can supplement this. I must say that Jyotiraditya is not Madhavrao. Jyotiraditya is certainly not Madhavrao.
I can hold one mic for you, sir.
Hello. Jyotiraditya is certainly not Madhavrao. He is not as popular. Let us face it. I mean, I must say that I have tried to interact with him also. There are others in my office who are interacting with him on a regular basis for the book. And I found that there was a lots of distinction between the two persons. And I have to relate a story here. I happened to go to Hyderabad in 57 with my father, and I found that the Nizam's name was preceded by HEH. So I asked my father, what is this? He said, His Exalted Highness is what they say. So incidentally, I happened to go to Hyderabad again to work with the Indian Express in 77. I just related that. He said, Naidu साहब वो exalted नहीं रह गया, अब exhausted highness रह गया. तो अब हमारे यहाँ क्या हुआ, इत्तेफाक से I left a message for Jyotiraditya to call, and after some time I get a call that HH wants to speak to you after 5 minutes. I said I don't want to speak to him. I must say that I was totally put off. I have been interacting with Madhavrao very regularly, and he was almost had heart-to-heart talk with him, and particularly on a day he talked about Shatabdi Express. He said he was very angry with Angre, and he said that this gentleman happens to be very low in the hierarchy. He kept his feet on his front seat all through the 7 hours journey from Bhopal to Gwalior just to run me down. I mean, and I was surprised that he would have been able to walk after those 7 hours, having kept his feet all through the upper seat. So, I mean, this is something that I must say that it goes down, it doesn't go down well with the people sometimes. Let us face that. I think I exceeded the time, but I have to talk about this.
हेलो सर, कहा जाता है कि वर्ल्ड का सबसे बड़ा मोतियों का कलेक्शन सिंधिया घराने में है, इसलिए उनको
क्या है क्या है वर्ल्ड का
मोतियों का कलेक्शन।
हाँ, मैंने तो नहीं देखा है।
इसलिए उनको मोतियों वाला की उपाधि थी।
नहीं, ऐसा कहते हैं कि अलाउद्दीन के बाद सबसे बड़ा खजीना जो था वो ग्वालियर में था, उसके रिकॉर्ड्स भी हैं सब दूर, मतलब ब्रिटिशर से उन लोगों ने कहा था।
दूसरा वहाँ
खजाना
वहाँ एक किंवदंती है,
जेम्स एंड दिस थिंग। I think he is from the Gwalior Gharan, so he would be able to throw more light. He may have gone to see this thing. हाँ। तो आप क्या पूछना चाहते हैं?
मैं यही पूछ रहा था कि वो जो सबसे बड़ा कलेक्शन उनका है, उन्होंने पैसा भी बहुत, जैसे 1.5 करोड़ रुपया उस टाइम 75 प्लस 75 lakhs नीमच से मालवा और मालवा से इस पूरे बेल्ट के लिए ब्रिटिश गवर्नमेंट को लोन दिया था। ये गजट नोटिफिकेशन भी है। जितने फोर्ड उनके पास है, ये पिंडारियों को उन्होंने निपटाया था, जहाँ नीमच और मंसूर शहजादे को हटाया था।
तो आपका प्रश्न है कुछ?
भाई यही जानकारी कि आपकी बुक्स में पढ़ नहीं पाया।
मेरी बुक्स में वो मोतियों का जिक्र थोड़ा सा इतना ही है कि काफी कुछ अलाउद्दीन के बाद में सबसे ज्यादा खजाना हुआ था, और जब इनकम टैक्स की रेड हुई थी तो वो लोग ये ढूंढना चाह रहे थे कि दीवारों के पीछे नीचे कहां पर ये जेम्स रखे हुए थे। ये तो इमरजेंसी की बात है, मतलब 1977 से 75 से 77 के बीच में। लेकिन जब राजमाता जी एक्सपायर हुई और उनकी जो विल जो सरदार आंग्रे ने दिल्ली के प्रेस क्लब में जारी की, उसके बाद इंडियन एक्सप्रेस रैन ए स्टोरी कि ये जो माधवराव सिंधिया और राजमाता जी का झगड़ा है, जो आपको लग रहा है छोटा मोटा है, ये छोटा मोटा झगड़ा नहीं है। ये 30,000 करोड़ की संपत्ति राजमाता जी छोड़ गई थी और उसके ऊपर विल का झगड़ा था। तो 30,000 करोड़ की संपत्ति तो ऑफिशियल डॉक्यूमेंटेड संपत्ति 2001 में थी जब व्हेन शी डाइड। तो उसके बाद के बारे में तो बात ज्यादा।
दिल्ली की सिंधिया पॉटरीज 1,00,000 करोड़ की है।
हाँ, तो दिल्ली में जब दिल्ली में महाजी सिंधिया ने कब्जा कर लिया तो दिल्ली के आधे से ज्यादा लैंड और आधे से ज्यादा लाल किले से आसपास की सारी जगह तो उन्हीं की थी। आज तो उनके पास 5% भी जमीन नहीं होगी दिल्ली की।
Vijay Rajiv Scindia, Rajmata's body. That was his book. You purchased that.
Okay, now I would like to invite on stage Mrs. Meera Ishwar Das to please come forward and present a memento to our author and speaker as a token of love, respect, gratitude combined. The memento consists of a painting made by Padma Shri Bhuri Bai, an eminent and a fine piece of art. Here is the painting.